So this video series I'm releasing is just a prerequisite to the launch of my program, Be the Change, and I really wanted to just use some examples of my personal experience to give a little bit more context as to why I've created a course such as this, and why I feel like it's such an important part of self-inquiry and doing any kind of work or self-exploration. If that's something that you enjoy doing in your life, then this will be something that you'll love. And my first big story that I wanted to share about is the change of moving from a drinker to a non-drinker. And although that sounds like a very simple kind of substance-focused change, it was the biggest change that I had ever facilitated for myself, and it was definitely the catalyst for the rest of my entire life, as is every kind of big transformation. Cause and effect, yeah. So in 2007, I was really on my knees in terms of my emotional, mental, and my physical health. I had been drinking really heavily for a few years. Before then, I was quite a large pothead, although my understanding of that particular time of my life, when I was smoking a lot of weed, has really changed, specifically recently over the past few years. I actually think it was a really positive time for me, although I'm glad I didn't carry on smoking in that way. It definitely was medicine for me at a really, really difficult time in my life. But the drinking was super, super destructive for me, and it also led me to other drugs such as cocaine. So I don't know if I would have ended up in rehab if it wasn't for the cocaine. I think that the harshness and the toxicity of that substance and what it did to my psyche and my physical being was so strong that it brought me to my knees pretty quickly. I think I was only using coke for like a year or 2 years before I ended up literally on my knees in the lounge at 8 o'clock one kind of Tuesday morning, and I hadn't gone to work, and I'd had another bender. I don't think I'd stopped from the whole weekend, since the Friday. And I phoned my best friend Jane, and I can't remember exactly what I said, but it was a cry for help. I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I remember I was drinking red wine because I was trying to come down off the really horrendous feeling that one gets at the end of a coke binge. And that phone call changed my life. She phoned my mother, and the next few days are a little bit of a blur, but we investigated a couple of rehabs, and eventually I ended up going to a rehab quite far away from where I was living. Far away in Cape Town terms, it's like half an hour drive. And yeah, I was in rehab for I think about 9 weeks, and yeah, it was the biggest thing that ever happened to me. And a lot of people go to rehab and they don't get sober and they don't stay sober, and I really want to highlight the importance of, or the value of, privilege in this instinct. How lucky I was to have a father who was willing to pay for me to go to rehabilitation. Not everybody has that opportunity, and I'm really, really glad that I seized that opportunity, and I wasn't ungrateful. I was very much in a state of surrender, and not everybody is in that state when they hit a rock bottom, and often it's not a rock bottom if they're not in that place of surrender. And from the moment I went to rehab, I was very much committed to what I was doing, and I was genuinely very open-minded and naive, I guess, as well. They told me I was an alcoholic. I was like, okay, I'm an alcoholic. They told me I had eating disorders. I was like, okay. And that's something I knew already, and something I managed to hide from them for a while. They told me I was a sex and love addict because I had been promiscuous, where in fact I was actually just taken advantage of by a lot of men. So it's another thing that I've had quite a 360 around. So there were a lot of aspects of rehab that, I don't particularly agree with now, but at the time it was the best thing that could have happened to me. And I didn't just stay sober because of like going to rehab. I put the work in, put a lot of hard work into it. And why I wanted to actually start or create this video series was to really illustrate the importance of commitment and practice when facilitating any form of change. Now, this was a massive change. I went from being the life of the party in an entire, like a very set group of friends that did a very set group of activities every weekend, to not being a part of that crowd at all. Now being in this completely different community of recovering addicts and alcoholics, and going to meetings all the time. So the premise of the 12-step program is you're given a set of suggestions, steps, 12 steps to follow to maintain that level of sobriety. And there are things that you're encouraged to do every single day. And there's, constant contact with a sponsor, somebody who, like a mentor, like in any other context, it would be kind of like a therapist or maybe even a best friend, but a sponsor's role is actively to support you and guide you to somewhere where they have been before, which is just, that whole concept is just so amazing, because I feel like that's exactly what a coach does. That's exactly what a mentor does. And in some instances with therapists, although therapists often there isn't that much of a personal relationship. It's also, if there's somebody, if you look at somebody and go, I want what they have, then that person's calling you to do some work with them, or to, and there's some issues with the program for me now if I look back, but it got me sober, and I wholeheartedly respect it for what it did for me and what it does for so many other people around the world. And what I ended up doing, I established this committed practice around the actual steps, so going to meetings frequently, and I had a very set plan of what I would do every day. And all of these activities, these behavior changes, were happening because I was led, given direction, and I was doing them consistently. So that consistent practice of a new way of life just created a new way of life for me. So if I look back, there was a lot of effort involved, but I also felt like I didn't really have any other choice. So you'll get to a point in your life where you need to change something, and the act of actually continuing to do the thing that you want to stop or you want to change is not bringing the results that you need anymore, and you will get to a point where you'll be like, you know what, I can't actually do this anymore, and that's that point of surrender. And that's a very, very, very important time to admit that something's not working and to ask for help. So, and then on top of that, what I started doing, or in addition to that, what I started doing is my own kind of daily practice. And this is only something that I've really thought about recently, when I was thinking about, wow, all these really big changes and small changes I've made in myself, and therefore that have transpired in my life. One of my friends who I was working with at the time told me about these sun salutations. I didn't even know what they were. I didn't even know what yoga was, literally. She just told me this is a nice thing to do in the mornings, because I would wake up with loads of anxiety. And she said I could look it up on YouTube. So I did that. I went and looked it up on YouTube, and I started doing these sun salutations every day, in addition with going for a run and doing some morning pages, so a gratitude list. And although now that's not something that, my practice doesn't look like that. Essentially, it's a version of that. And that is 12 years ago. I've been doing that for 12 years. Some kind of version of a morning practice. And that consistency of committing to something every single day creates change. And it wasn't about actively, I never thought about, very rarely did I think about, oh, I'm stopping, I mustn't have a drink today, I'm not going to have a drink today. And for a lot of people it does look like that, but it didn't look like that for me. And it doesn't always have to be that, an alcoholic is somebody who is and I don't even really believe in this terminology anymore, but just for the sake of the context of which I'm talking about the story, an alcoholic is not necessarily somebody who's like waking up and drinking vodka in the morning. It's just somebody who is existing from the black hole. So the black hole that we all have inside, that void, that place that we go to, that emptiness, that place where we're constantly seeking to fill with external things, the darkness, whatever you want to call it, the shadow. When that kind of takes over your life, and it's the only place that you're kind of existing in, then we will always look for things to temporarily make it feel better, and then it ends up just getting bigger. So it doesn't really matter what you're doing, whether you're drinking or whether you're engaging in an obsessive eating habit, or whether you're in an unhealthy relationship, or whether you're in a job that you really hate, or whatever. There are so many loops that we're stuck in, and until we wake ourselves up, and in order to wake ourselves up, we need to bring consciousness into our daily life. And for me, the best time of day to do that is in the mornings, when we literally open our eyes. We're in the closest space to our subconscious, just waking up from a dream state, and we have easy access to the part of our brain that we're often not in communication with, that communicates to us through our dreams, that communicates to us through our intuition, all that kind of liminal space. If we can start to engage with that space from the moment we wake up, we are creating more space for consciousness in our lives, and therefore more capacity for change. And then change feels actually quite easy, and it's not this really punishing and enforcing energy in our lives. And that's essentially what I'm hoping to get across in this program, or will get across in this program. And yeah, that's an example of a really profound and massive change that I've maintained for 12 years of my life, and how practice was the foundation of that change, and continues to be the foundation of that change and every other change that I've made in my life. Thank you for being here.